Hi, welcome to Evidence for Faith. It's your host, Michael Lane. So glad you're joining me today as we explore another piece of an artifact that has been discovered in Israel that supports the biblical story dating back into the time of King Solomon and King Rehoboam. This artifact is called today, as it's on display museum, it's called today the Shoshonq I Victory Stela. Now, you might not catch anything biblical from that name because Shoshonq I is the Egyptian name of a pharaoh the Hebrews called Shishak. Now, to get into this, because this gets really interesting, let's go back into the Bible in chapter 1 of 1 Kings chapter 11, and let's explore a little bit of what was going on there. Now, in 1 Kings, in this chapter of number 11, we read that Solomon is the king, and he was doing a lot of building projects, and there was this young guy whose name was Jeroboam that Solomon took notice of because he was in the building program, and Solomon noticed him and actually elevates him to the role of superintendent. So he gets lifted up into a very high position and really impressed with him. But not long after this happens, a prophet of God by the name of Abijah comes, now he's a Shilonite, he actually comes and talks to and finds Jeroboam to give him a prophecy that God has given him. That he tells him that because Solomon has walked away from God, that he was going to tear 10 tribes of the 12 tribes of Israel, 10 of those tribes he was going to pull away and give him, Jeroboam, as a kingdom. So Jeroboam would be a king. And he would leave then 2 tribes that Solomon would, or Rehoboam, Solomon's son, would keep in, who was, of course, these are descendants of King David. So he's honoring the promise he made to King David. So we have these 10 tribes to the north and 2 tribes to the south. So now what ends up happening, Solomon finds out about this. And I don't know, Jeroboam might have been going around shooting off his mouth too much. But what happens is Solomon finds out. Jeroboam has to flee for his life. He runs to Egypt. And there in Egypt, he seeks asylum with Shoshonq I, who the Bible calls Shishak. And he stays there for protection. He takes asylum there until the death of Solomon, because Solomon wanted to have him killed. Well, when Solomon finally died and Rehoboam, his son, now becomes the new king of Israel, Jeroboam, okay, it's my turn now. So he comes back. This is 1 Kings chapter 12 now. Jeroboam comes back to Israel, and he leads a coup against Rehoboam, Solomon's son. And because of this coup, it's successful. 10 of the tribes, the northern tribes of Israel, they join on with Jeroboam and say, you be our king. And so Jeroboam now becomes the king of what is called Israel. The 2 tribes that are left to the south of the 12, they stay together. They call themselves the kingdom of Judah. So now we have the kingdom of Judah and we have the kingdom of Samaria, the upper kingdom, the lower kingdom. Sometimes the upper kingdom of Israel is sometimes called Ephraim. It is sometimes called Samaria. But it is that upper kingdom and the lower kingdom. And Jeroboam now takes the title, because there'll be another Jeroboam later. He's Jeroboam I. And even though God chose him and told him he was going to honor him for his walk, Jeroboam lets this all go to his head, and he turns away from God also. So he is no longer walking with God. He sins. King Rehoboam is sinning. King Jeroboam is sinning. Boy, it seems like everybody is sinning even to this day. So as we keep reading this in 1 Kings chapter 14, and also this is in 2 Chronicles chapter 12, God allowed Pharaoh Shishak, as it reads here, to invade the Levant, the area of the Middle East there. And he didn't do this when Solomon was alive. He waited till Solomon had died and waited a little bit, and then he came in and did this. The kingdoms are already separated. And he attacks many cities when he goes in here to do this. We know from a relief on the wall of the great temple of Karnak. Now, we talked about that temple in Egypt when we talked about the in our series on David and the giants. We talk about evidence for David, and one of the images on that temple site there is an image of David, which saying that Shishak conquered Rehoboam's kingdom, that he conquered Jerusalem, and plus he conquered a lot of others. It says on that temple, they have a whole set of little cartouches that talk about these little plaques of all the places that Shishak sort of says that he conquered. And in the Upper Kingdom, it says that there's like 150 of these that are named here that he conquered, besides the kingdom of Judah. And we get a description of him actually conquering. In the Bible, it tells us that he conquered Jerusalem. Now, he didn't burn all these cities. Most of them he didn't. He conquered them. In Jerusalem, he did not burn the city down. Apparently, he surrounded it, and he sort of just captured it. He plundered. Is more of what he did to these cities. He plundered them. And like I say, over 150 towns to the north, and also in Judah he did. And it's displayed all on that Buddhistite thing in the Temple of Karnak, of Shishak, that is there, we talked about before. But he conquered other places besides, even in Judah, besides Jerusalem. There's a thing there talking about how he conquered Gibeon, he conquered Arad, even conquered Bethshan, way up to the north in the northern kingdom, and he conquered Megiddo. Now, I'm mentioning Megiddo because this is going to be the focus of our artifact here that we're talking about. And like I say, if you want to find out more about this temple, you can go back to our series that lists these different kingdoms and stuff, and it's entitled David and the Giants, and it's the first lesson there talking about evidence of David that we mentioned this. But anyway, let's move on, because David's grandson Rehoboam is now the conquered person, and as he conquered the house of David. Now, it's interesting, like I say, that Shishak did not burn any of these cities. He just plundered them and brought back a whole vast amount of treasure. We know this from Egyptian writings also, that Shishak then ordered that some of these cities would start they would have temples. He started dedicating the gold that he had taken for many of the temples, where all of a sudden we see in Egyptian history that all of a sudden they just have a vast amount of tons and tons of gold. Where did it come from? It came from this invasion that he did of the Levant. And Shishak, when he did this, and he came to Jerusalem, you got to remember too, Solomon, he wouldn't do this when Solomon was alive, because Solomon married Shishak's daughter. So Shishak has a son-in-law that's named Solomon, and that's in 1 Kings chapter 11, verse 1. We read about this. Yeah, Solomon married the daughter of Shishak. But this whole marriage seems to be much more motivated politically than for love. After all, Solomon had what, 700 wives, 300 concubines, when that's recorded in 1 Kings 11:3. So I don't think there was a lot of love involved here. And we might even do another thing, because there is some evidence of found in Jerusalem of Solomon having a Egyptian wife. But that's on another thing that we'll do sometime here in the future. What people want to know, is there any evidence of Shishak's invasion of the Levant, and particularly up in coming in and taking these cities and stuff like this? Well, we've already seen that he conquered Jerusalem. We know that. But is there anything about the kingdom of Jeroboam? Well, as we mentioned, he did conquer Megiddo. There's no question about this, because in the early 20th century, some digging started taking place at Megiddo. Now, the way in the early 20th century, there was an American archaeologist named was Gottlieb Schumacher. Now, Schumacher, excuse me, he's German by birth, but he's an American archaeologist. Schumacher was digging at Tel, that's the hill that Megiddo sits on, at Tel Megiddo. Now, he was doing this in the early, like around 1902, and he dug for quite a bit around there, and then World War I broke out and sort of stopped his digs. But after World War I was over, he went back to Megiddo and started digging some more. But in those days, archaeology was done so differently. They didn't have, this is like a new science still, and didn't know exactly what they were doing. Most of the time, Schumacher went out and just dug holes in the ground at random places, well, strategic places he thought, but there was not much to back it up. And he's digging holes and he's digging trenches. And they're pulling out artifacts, and they look at some of these, that look something interesting that we can make sense of. Okay, we'll study this. If it's something, and this is most of the case, they pulled out big blocks of stones and stuff like this, well, we'll just throw that over in the dump. And you can, many of these archaeological sites have dumps where they have just taken artifacts, broken pottery and other things that they just don't think there's any value or historical value to, and they throw it in a dump. And so one of these blocks that they pulled out of, that Schumacher and his assistants pulled out of this dig that there at Megiddo, found its way into the dump. Then after World War II, something happens. This fragment gets dug up, but no recordings are made. See, Schumacher, when he dug this up, he didn't record where at the Tel he dug this up. So we have no way of identifying where this thing came from. And what we're talking about is a fragment of a rock that looks like this picture here, as we have, showing you a fragment of this, and it has some hieroglyphics on here and some cartouches. And the thing is, this is actually cartouches with the names of Shishak, or actually it's not Shishak, that's the Hebrew name, it's Shoshonq I. Shoshonq I. And this is showing evidence that he did invade and conquered Megiddo. They found this there, there's no question about it. But this rock, even though our sample here looks very thin, the actual sample is several centimeters thick. Over 20 inches thick this thing is. It's huge in size. It was just a block that had been broken and they just threw it away. So they had no idea of what this thing was. But by looking at this, scientists and archaeologists and scholars have studied this, trying to see what this thing possibly was, since it has its name on it. Now, there's been a couple of theories that come up on this, and it's not an insignificant block. It has now been found to be something very important because it's got Pharaoh Shoshonq I's name right on there, and it is talking about what, no doubt, we only have his name on here and a little bit about how great he was, but the rest of it is all missing. So what is it from? Most scholars believe that it came from that this is a segment or a block that was believed to be a stele. That's a monument erected that the king would have erected, showing all of his victories and stuff like this, that Shoshonq I had conquered and how he conquered these. And I have one. There's not one been found to my knowledge in Megiddo, one of these, but there have been some of these found in other places. For instance, we have an image here that is popping up on your screen right now of one that is a stele that is found in Bethshan. That's north of Megiddo, just a little bit, but it's way to the east. It's still like in the same valley, the Jezreel Valley, where the Jezreel Valley joins onto the royal, near the Jordan River. That's Bethshan. And this stele is sitting there, but this one is not of Shoshonq. This is from Seti I. Now, as you look at this image here, I want you to see the very top, as this thing curves and goes to the top, there is some writing, there's some wings coming down, and then there's writings. This is where the identification mark of whose this is. So at the top of the stele is the name of the conqueror. In this case, it's Seti I. And they would have this at the top. And then there'd be an image of him, and then there'd be all about his great victory and what he did, etc., etc. We have not found one of these there, but many scholars believe that this fragment that we're looking at actually was located at the top of a stele just like that one that Shoshonq I actually built there in Megiddo. And like I say, it's pretty good size, 50 centimeters. That's 20 inches thick. So some scholars, just because of the thickness of this, because most steles are not that thick, but this one is, and it's so thick, so some scholars believe this can't be right. It can't be a stele monument. It had to be something else proclaiming his great victory. So there are some scholars that say that what it was, that Shoshonq I, Shishak, built a statue of himself, and at the base of the statue, where here we're showing you one of Ramses II at Memphis, was found in Memphis, Egypt. And if you notice at the bottom of this massive, thick statue, there is also writings and cartouches is showing who it is. So some scholars believe that is what it is. I'm not sure I really swallow that myself. I don't think that's the case. To me, it leans more to being a stele. Still, others believe that this is a fragment from just a wall that was set up at Megiddo, that signifying his conquering, that was just destroyed by the inhabitants over the years. We don't know. there are some fascinating things. For instance, in archaeology, Biblical Archaeology Review, this is the June or July, August, or it is, yeah, July, August issue of 2012. There's an article in here. Did Pharaoh Shishak actually conquer Jerusalem? There's a picture of the wall here we were just talking about it there, and a close-up of the wall to let you see what the wall looks like that we have again mentioned. We'll have the picture on here that you can see, and you can see where these cartouches were, and Megiddo is actually listed on this wall there at the Temple of Karnak. So whatever this was, whatever it is, if it's a stele, a little personal monument, was it a wall, was it a part of a statue, we don't know. But what we do know is, without any shadow of a doubt, this artifact was found in Megiddo, having the name of Shoshonq, who is Shishak in the Bible, having his name there, and he did conquer it. And the Bible says that he went up and he conquered these different tribes. So this, again, adds much, much help. So it helps so much when we now, and this is becoming very popular in archaeology, they're going back over these dumps outside of these cities, and they're finding tons of artifacts, hundreds and thousands of artifacts. The most important one going on right now is probably the Temple Project, the Temple Mount Project. They're going through the dumps there, finding all sorts of things. So looking in the dumps, you find often very many artifacts that are very, very important for helping us know more that the Bible is true. So I hope you've enjoyed this lesson, and if you have, please let us know. Also, if you wouldn't mind, if you pray about us, please, and we would ask that you'd please, if you can, if the Lord puts it upon your heart, to donate to us so we can make more videos like this and more podcasts out there to let the people know that God is real, His Word is real. As a matter of fact, we just recently heard from a person in New Zealand who's listening to us. We just love this, that we're getting around the world so much. And we'd love you to be a part of this ministry. Please subscribe to our websites, but until we meet again, take care and may God bless.